Saucy Not Bossy.
Welcome in, everybody. This is going to be a real heartfelt episode because I have a wonderful guest named Emelia, and we have so much more in common than we even realize we do. And I can't wait to have this conversation with you, Emelia. So welcome, Emelia, to
Thank
Saucy.
you.
And I'm so excited to talk to you today because, having a child on the spectrum is really tough.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and I want you to introduce yourself to everybody here. So tell me more and tell everybody more about yourself.
So my name's Emelia. I am from Southwest Florida, and I have 2 sons on the spectrum. We kind of got that buy one, get one diagnosis. And they are 6 and 2.5. So we have double the fun over here. I'm no expert, but I think through the trials and tribulations, I can at least offer, some war stories more than anything else. But yeah, we're in the throes of it right now, but we're getting through and just trying to help as many people because, like you said, when it first happened, we had just moved to a new state and we had no idea what we were doing. And I hadn't made any connections yet. I just want to share that so that other people may not necessarily feel that lost and alone in the process. So yeah.
Okay, let's go back. So
Okay.
you have your son, and
Yep.
what were the signs? What were the feelings? How old was he when you started to notice? And what were those moments for people that may be questioning if, they should get a pediatrician's help?
So my oldest son is Maddox. He was born in 2019, and as many people experienced, we thought it was because of COVID. So many people who went through that were saying, "Oh, it's just COVID," or "It's just a speech delay." So we started seeing, if I look back and I pinpoint the moment now, in hindsight, I feel like he was about 18 months old and we saw this shift in his personality. It wasn't necessarily what some people say where they see a regression. A lot of people, they're saying words and then it's almost like a year to 18 months is when they lose those words. They were progressing normally and then suddenly, it just feels like, what happened, what's going on. And so we were in Virginia at the time, and the lockdowns started when Maddox was about 6-7 months old. Prior to that, we had taken him everywhere with us. We had taken him to concerts, breweries, festivals. It was so important to us to have him around people. And then once the lockdown started, he was with me, my husband, or my mom. I worked in a hospital, so I certainly had work. And we just noticed that, it was initially a speech delay. So as time went on, we had decided to move to Florida in the midst of all this. And when we moved, Maddox was about 2 years old. And at that point, we just thought it was a speech delay. So we thought, okay, let's get down there. Let's get settled. And when he was about 2.5, we decided to start him in preschool, actually. And that's when we saw the most significant difference was seeing him with other kids. We had no real experience. I had worked with kids. I've been a teacher, but, I worked with older kids. And that's where we saw the difference with him versus other kids.
And what was that difference? What was that?
So we always knew that Maddox was a little young for his age per se. So we were kind of expecting him to maybe have to catch up a little bit. His speech was it was there, but still not that great. He was in speech therapy at the time. And you had all these kids. This was 2 years old, so you can't expect too much at that age. But the other kids were, interactive playing with other kids, greeting people when they walked in the door, having interest in other people. And Maddox just basically went in. He found something that he liked, and that was what he focused on. And then his big hallmark is that he it was when demands were placed on him. Demands, that sounds kind of harsh, but a circle time or having to transition outside, doing an art project. There was no way. Teachers were like, "Hey, we're trying our best." I mean, there were 10 other kids in the room. They're like, "We really can't have him participate because he doesn't want to." And that's when we really sat down and we looked back and other people started noticing some things that we did. So I know you mentioned, I think your son does this as well, the side looking. So where, yeah, exactly.
Listening, yeah, you put something in
Yep.
front of your eye and then you kinda look to the side
Yes,
to try.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That was
That's
our big one. Is it a quirk? Or like, is he just quirky? I mean, he's
well,
my kid. Of course he's gonna be quirky.
which is a good thing.
And yeah, so right around that time, we were like, okay, we really need to figure this out. So we got him into speech therapy and OT. And the first session we went, I'd mentioned what was going on. They wanted an info sheet from the preschool teachers. And this OT, she was amazing. She was such a guardian angel in our journey. She just did an evaluation with him and she just looks at me and she goes, "I think he's on the spectrum."
That's so refreshing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know
No,
what
no,
I
no, please do.
how many people did not wanna say it to my husband and I?
Yes,
Like, they just were,
absolutely.
"Well," I'm like, "You're an expert. You're an occupational
Yes,
therapist. You're a like, just tell me." But it's
yes,
California. "Oh, you could get sued or some shit." I'm like, "No, no,
yeah,
just give it to me."
just
Okay, so
yes,
thank God she said, "Okay, he's
yep,
on the spectrum. She thinks he
yeah.
is." Okay, and then what do you do?
So at this time it was a little chaotic. I was actually pregnant with my second and I kind of went into survival mode, like tunnel vision. Okay, so we got resources and they said, "Okay, this is how you can get testing." That was our first stop. Our first thing that we had to do was because once you get that testing done and you get that diagnosis, those autism spectrum disorders that are disorder, that's when you get access to all the therapy that you need. So we immediately reached out to a behavior specialist who does, it's called ADOS testing. That's at least what it is called here in Florida. And we got him in. We actually wanted to do it so quickly that we paid out of pocket because we were like, we want to get this right now. And we brought him to the testing. It was about an hour. And, we got the diagnosis within a few days because we're like,
What does it look like? You bring him, does he go into a room with the specialist? Like, what does that look like?
yeah, so you fill out a lot of forms online, just lists of, okay, your typical scale of 1 to 5. Does your child do this? Does your child not do this? And, just all those developmental surveys, like the ones that you take, like after you have a baby up to like 3 years old, they have you fill them out at the pediatrician's office. And then we went in, it was about an hour. She's a behavioral therapist and we were in the room and she just gave him these different tasks. So it's per their age. So he was just turned 3 at this point. And like she would give him a toy. Then she would see how he would play with it. And then she would try and interact with him. And she'd like take the toy and be like, "Oh, look at this. What's this doing?" And she's going to see, is your child interacting with her or are they focused on the toy? Putting those demands on them, just different scenarios. I mean, it was great. It wasn't like this intense testing or anything. It was basically it was just play. She was getting to know him. And so, yeah, a bunch of different toys, books. A lot of it was her engaging with him and seeing, what kind of eye contact does he make? Because we know that's a paramount sign of autism spectrum disorder and just different objects and seeing how he reacted to them. And he naturally was very oppositional. That's kind of his big characteristic of it. And after that hour, she asked me more questions that weren't covered in or went over things that I fill out on the form. And then she wrote up a report, got it signed off by a developmental pediatrician. And then we had this extensive report where she detailed everything that he did and then rated it on a scale because there's a scale of 1 to 3, what level they are. So she got all of that data and then we got the report and that was basically our golden ticket from there on out. So that is so important to get, and it was even still, like, we weren't really sure we believed that was what it was, so it was like, "Okay, is she going to tell us this is just a quirk, or is this actually what it is?" That was our first step. Like, we just dropped everything and got the testing done.
So you go right to if someone right now, because there's a lot of parents that wanna be in
Yes.
denial and seeing it
Yep.
right now, and I'm like, they're 6 and 7 years old. I'm like,
Yep.
"Oh my god, help this child."
Yeah.
Well, if they're listening right now, the first thing
Yes.
you do is you go to a behavioral therapist first. You
Yes.
contact your insurance and then go to
Yes.
a behavioral therapist, and then they're the ones that can put the diagnosis on
Yes.
and from 1 to 3, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you
And
can also oh, sorry.
no, please.
You can also go to a developmental pediatrician. So not your regular pediatrician, but I'll say here in our area, I'm in between Tampa and Sarasota. So we've had a big population boom, a lot of people coming from out of state like us, and it's hard to find them. The one good developmental pediatrician in our area has at least a year to a year and a half wait.
Crazy.
So I found out what the testing was called. It was the ADOS testing. I typed it in and I found one of the agencies that does it. There are a few. They're private a lot of times. You can also get them done through the schools or early start programs. But we decided that we wanted to get the most comprehensive one that we could get. So I just Googled it. I reached out. I said, okay, this is what we're seeing. And we got on the schedule. And like you said, you can get the insurance approval. Takes a little bit longer. We decided to pay out of pocket, which, isn't possible for everyone, but you can definitely use insurance for it. And I reached out and yeah, I just did a quick Google search because at that point I had no idea. So Google was my best friend.
Thank God. Yeah, because with Cassius, I kept thinking, is he hard of hearing? Does he just because my dad's hard of
Yes.
so it's like maybe he just doesn't hear me or he's just people
Mhm.
what's up with and I'm like, "Oh, I think he's just really tired because he wouldn't be
Yes.
sleeping a lot." That was a sign
Yeah.
too about a year and a half mark.
Mhm.
But then, then Netflix would come on. I'd turn on Netflix and he'd be in the other room and he would hear the doom, how like you put on
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, "Okay, he's not hard of hearing. He
Oh,
can
yeah.
hear." But yeah. Okay, so you get the diagnosis,
Yep.
you're pregnant,
Yeah.
right? What is that feeling of, oh my gosh, what's my journey about to be, right? And then how did he get autism? Do you think about that? That's one thing where I'm like, is it the shots? Then I start thinking like,
Mhm.
well, I know autistic people. And then I start going back to my family heritage. And I'm like, there was that weird aunt on my dad's side
Yes.
but
Mhm.
nobody spoke about it. Aunt
Yep.
Mary.
Yep.
So, like, did you have all of, like, a movie go through your head when you first got the diagnosis?
Absolutely. And with my second, I had severe morning sickness. Like it was just if there were any time for it to happen, it was probably one of the worst times. But I think also because I was so miserable and I wanted something else to focus on, that was what became my focus. And yeah, I went into that mindset where I had worked with kids before with autism, but like with our generation, what we saw as that was something completely different than what it is now. So you go back to that where you knew like one or two kids who had it and they were nonverbal and typically it was still kind of the time, at least for me in elementary school, where you still had the separate classrooms. Their inclusion wasn't as big a deal as it was. So we started to look back and doing some research. I know that again, you automatically think, okay, vaccines. We had gotten all of our vaccines, all of our required vaccines. And then I'm thinking, looking into genetics. That was the thing that I feel like we personally have the most, like the biggest connection to. Um,
I love
so
it.
myself,
I love it. Go ahead.
I yeah.
Love it.
Um, I'm so dehydrated. Self care, yay. Um, Looked back and I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was in high school. I had a very late diagnosis because of the whole girls are different with these kind of neurodivergent things. So I looked back at that, and then I looked back at certain members of my family again, where it's like that. You're always like they're a little quirky, like they had these things they liked. You're like, wow, compared to my child, they're very similar.
Right.
And I know there's debate what side of the family it can come from necessarily, but my husband also has like ADD and some OCD. So we're thinking like there it is because I mean, we really couldn't think of what else it could be because you're immediately like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
One.
and I mean, Facebook can be the worst for that because you see this like, "Oh, study on this. Did you give your kid this?" It's like, "Was it the baby food I gave him? Like, was it because I took some, cough medicine when I was pregnant?" You're looking back trying to think, where did it come from? What happened? What did I do?
Right, right.
Yeah,
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that when people and I think that's why a lot of people don't want to see it and deal with, there's
absolutely.
they'll outgrow it. Another thing is, okay, so then he got diagnosed, then you go work with the school because then it's all a blur to me. Like, I remember
Yes, yes.
and I remember this awful psychiatrist came to our house and he literally, no one would tell us that Cash was on the spectrum. Nobody. He walks them, he sits with them, doesn't do the play, doesn't do any of that, just looks at him. And then, like, literally within 45 minutes, like, barely looking at him, talking about his own life, he's like, yeah, he's on the spectrum. And I was like, am I seeing you again? He's like, no, you won't. And so I'm like dealing with my mom with Alzheimer's, with my
Mhm,
dad being the awful human he is, not wanting to see it. But then, now I have guilt of like, where did this come from? What is
mhm.
happening? And then, I have another daughter and you're pregnant. So okay, so he's on the spectrum. And then what happens with schools?
Well, at that point in Florida, we you can start in preschool. Any kids, they're called exceptional student education. We initially started with ABA. That was our first step, but then school was next. So we did our research. We contacted the district. I didn't realize that kids could start at 3. Here in Florida, they do free VPK, so any kid can do VPK. I didn't even know about preschool. So then we went in and got him tested by the district. So they did the same thing, all these forms, and then they did an evaluation very similar where they had a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, and I think like a special education teacher. And they did their own evaluation on him to determine what kind of classroom he potentially could be placed in. So even if you're not thinking about sending your kid to school, it's great to have that as kind of a fallback, or just to have that extra information. So they do their own evaluation and then they determine we have different classroom levels. I always hate to say levels, but you have kids who need more help with speech. You have kids who would benefit being around more kids on the spectrum like themselves. And I think you said that Cash was in the classroom that Maddox was in. We call it VE. So it's varying exceptionalities where it's all kids who have an IEP, individualized education program or plan. So they placed him into that class and then we moved forward, enrolling him and whatnot. And yeah, so the school, I felt like they did a really good job, but again, it was a decision where we had to pick between like intensive therapies and school. And we ended up picking more intensive therapies. But yeah, you reach out to your district and they have specialists and they decide what kind of classroom he should be placed in. And then certain places you can start at 3, you can start at 4, and these levels go all the way up through, I think, at least I think they make it up to middle school and then they start doing full integration.
Yeah, we have it. There's such a long line, and
Yes,
everybody
yes,
to go with their gut too. So
yeah,
up here, I called a few ABA places, and there was a long line, and then it
yes,
called like I won the lottery, and so because he has a twin sister,
hmm,
they want to do countless hours with him with the ABA.
yes, yes,
Cash can speak, like he has words, he is verbal. He can't tell me, how his day is and all of that
hmm,
with the ABA in what was happening with my mom moving in and my life. I just felt pressured to do it, and
Yes.
they saw how many hours that they wanted to do to, like,
Yes.
keep the girl busy and, commit to for the girl more than Cassius. And Amelia, I said no for now.
Yeah.
He's in speech, he's in school where it's like 70-30. I say, like, a general
Mhm.
population,
Yeah.
30%.
Mhm.
But I'm kinda guilty sometimes where I'm like, could he benefit from it? But then at the same time, I put him in other activities like swim. What would be the benefit, educate me, of doing ABA? Or is it just what fits right with not stressing these poor kids out as well?
Yeah. So we initially, before we went to the school district, we got him into ABA. We did our research. ABA has its history. It's for some people and it's not for others. It has changed drastically. If you go on deep dives to see how it started, I can understand where people are like, okay, like I don't want to do this. This is behavior conversion therapy or something like that. So we did a lot of research and we reached out to one of the bigger companies because they are companies. I mean, you always have to remember that they are for profit company. And it was the same thing. We got insurance approval, and typically insurance will approve you for ours was 35 hours. And we went from Maddox being in preschool 2, 3 days a week because we only really sent him to be around other kids. And then they say, okay, we want these 35 hours. And it was this, yeah, 35 hours a week. So we were looking at, I can't even remember his name, but he was there. He was there every day. He was there Monday through Friday. This is where it's important to shop around, but at this point we had no idea what we were doing, so we kind of grabbed the first folks who could take us, who had availability. They almost in a way kind of pressured us to back off on the speech and the OT so that he could be in ABA all the time, and we were like, hard no, we need to keep him in this. So we ended up, he did a half day in there, but we had to cut out our speech and OT. And that's another guilt thing where part of me was like, should we have really done that? He still has deficits in those areas. But it was a big transition for him. And he was 3.5 at this point, coming up on 3.5. And he was exhausted. I mean, end of the day, it's just so much on them. So looking back, it was very intensive. We certainly saw the benefits from it, but again, we moved to a new place. We had no idea what was out there, what was available. I hadn't found any groups or resources. So, we try and put him in swimming. Again, his hallmark is opposition. Like people don't really understand how his mind works. And a lot of situations, it's like, well, we can't do this. And then sports, wasn't something that worked for us. And again, we were new to the area. We didn't know anyone. So it's not like we could try and like join these play groups and stuff. So we went straight into the ABA. But I do regret not fighting harder to keep him in those therapies and doing more activities, like you said, because now that he's in kindergarten, we definitely see that lack of being with more kids, being around other kids. The way we look at it now is we're with a different ABA company now, and they weren't even around when we started this whole journey. And if an ABA company is telling you, you have to do these 35 hours, I mean, a lot of times, again, being for profit, they want you to do as many hours as possible.
Right.
So part of me wishes that I'd gone back and been like, okay, I know we're approved for this, but we're not letting go of these things. Like, we still want to do things with him. So it was very intensive and it was very good for him, but I wish there was more of a balance and saying to that kind of company, like, we're your clients. Like,
Mm.
we're giving you our children. So if you find a company that's like, no, we won't do this, we need all hours, then it's a situation where you have to look for alternative therapies. You have to, there's very few ABA companies in our area. Like you said, hold off on it until he's older. Do more groups where they get used to full days. They
Right.
get used to getting that socialization. Um, so, we definitely see it now. So I wish we had found a balance at that point.
That's a good reminder. We are the
Yeah,
parents for our children. We have to go with
absolutely.
we feel we know our kids the best. So let me ask you, so then Maddox, does he talk? now? Where is he at in kindergarten, and what does his school look like? Because I'm in TK, and then I'm like, once he gets to kindergarten, what does that look like?
So he absolutely talks.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
He always had words. It was the same thing where his speech, he could repeat things. He could script things, but he couldn't really tell us what his needs were. And his big thing is scripting. So if he has favorite videos, he has favorite movies, he can script. I mean, he could script like hours of stuff from memory.
Wow.
So that's his big thing. So it's called functional scripting, where he scripts, but it applies to the situation. So if he wants to answer like, yes, he will go on this whole script where he's actually saying yes, but it's just this roundabout way of doing it. But now his speech is great. I mean, we're very fortunate with him, but he does still script. People and kids don't necessarily understand him, but I mean, he could talk your ear off all day. We continued doing ABA. We had him in pre-K for about half a year. We had insurance issues. We didn't have ABA with him. So during that time, this is kind of another regret I have, is that we decided to do the pre-K and not the ABA. And it really didn't go that well. Maddox is predisposed to regressions. If he's not kept in the same environment, the same structure, he'll regress. And so we did summer. We really didn't have ABA in that summer as well. And then we started him in public kindergarten. We had some ABA at that point because they go in the schools with you. I think ABA is super important, talking about, holding off on it. In school is where I feel like you get your biggest benefit because they go with them throughout the day. And it's like an aid paraprofessional, but it's just focused on your child and their behaviors. We had them for maybe half a day, and we knew within 2 weeks, we were like, this isn't going to work. He just wasn't ready. We weren't getting the support we needed. Um, we felt like not the school necessarily, but he was between two classrooms. Like, is he this level or this level? And I felt like they kind of wanted to hand him off. It can be frustrating working with him. So I was like, we're not doing this. Then we pulled him and we went back to ABA for the rest of the school year, because in Florida, you do not have to register for kindergarten until 6. So he
Okay.
was 5. And we just were like, he's not ready. He's not ready. We're going to pull him out. We're going to continue therapies and get him ready for school.
I just wish more people would just be open about, like, help us but I
Yes.
guess that you have to trial and error. He was in a regular
Yes.
schoolroom. Okay, got it.
Yes.
And then
Well, he was in a mixed schoolroom. Like, he was in that BE classroom
but he
again.
didn't have an aide, because right now Cassius has, which is amazing, which is why we moved up here. He has 8 kids in the class and 4 aides,
Well,
which
that's
is
amazing.
amazing, right? So
Yeah.
that like gives me anxiety just thinking he has nobody, and that's where the ABA, if it's not a certain school classroom of sorts,
Yes.
and that's where the ABA helps for the aide to come in and be with him during the day.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
So this year we were going to start kindergarten again. We actually wanted to wait a year to start kindergarten because he was a younger 5 when he started. And, we just thought he wasn't mature enough to start. So this year we could have gone back to public school, and we heard some things about the school that he was zoned for. And we're like, okay, we don't think this is the best environment for him. Let's look at our options. We actually considered homeschooling for a while, which is still something we're very interested in. But here in Florida, we have something called the Step Up Scholarship. So what it is that children who have an official diagnosis, as long as they are not in public school, you receive funding from the state. And that funding can go directly to private school programs.
Wow. Okay.
So I know it's not like that everywhere. From research I've done, I see that, certain states have voucher programs or alternative programs, but for us, we were like, okay, let's try an alternative school per se. So Right now, we have him in a very small school. I think it's like K through 12, and there's 40, 50 kids. And it's very Montessori based. It's child driven learning where they go based off of their interests, very flexible. Like his teacher doesn't even have a desk because she's constantly like in there, and they're just learning through experience. They're not sitting down. Maddox's like worst enemy is worksheets. That child will not do a worksheet. He hates them.
Me too.
So we knew, I know, right? We knew that we couldn't have him somewhere where he's sitting at a desk being told to do a worksheet. So we found out about this school and we started at the end of July because they're kind of technically a year-round schedule, but we're getting there. It's been a process. We're still experiencing some growing pains, but if it works out, we think it will be an amazing, place for him. But again, it's still nowhere's going to be perfect, and you still have to advocate no matter where you are. I mean, public school, homeschooling, private schools, there are schools that cater to neurodivergent autistic kids.
And how do you find these schools? Like, I know that we had the IEP and we have a specific TK, which is amazing. But like, I've got a few more questions. He's going into kindergarten next year. I don't know what that next step is. How do you find out about the grants? How do you like just do a lot of research?
Yeah, so I will say that for that scholarship, they advertise it, but they also really don't because I'm not making any assumptions here, but sometimes I feel like, you have to put the work in because the people who put the work in are the ones who would take the most advantage of that scholarship, but you have to dig for it. You have to look for it because the state offers it, but, they also don't widely advertise it to everyone. I'm trying to recall, I think we heard about that through school. And then our OT also, I think, gave us some information. So, but you don't always get that. You don't always get a list of resources. So we just started looking Google. We were like, okay, funding options for special needs children or alternative programs, and then, doing more research and reaching out to these schools and saying, 'cause you can go on a website, but saying, okay, this is my child. Do you feel like they'd be a good fit? Can we come in? Can we do some trial days and see how they would do, which most schools do. But yeah, I mean, you have to, unfortunately, no one's going to take your hand and walk you through it. You have to do the work for it.
Wow,
And
great
that was
tips.
all, yeah, that was all just research, 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 research. Um, You'll find people with differing opinions. You have to take it all with a grain of salt because somebody will say this is the best thing for your child. Somebody will say this is the best thing for your child. So it's trial and error, but just knowing the right things to Google and finding Facebook groups, searching for recommendations for, schools, where do you recommend, where don't you recommend? So yeah, we had to do research, and we asked people like what do other children use that you've seen success with, even like speech therapists in the school. So you just have to do your research. Unfortunately, there's no guide. Yeah.
Know your child, hone in. Now,
Yes.
let's hear the next question.
Hmm.
How the hell do you work? Do you work?
I don't.
Well,
um
do with all of, but like,
yeah.
yeah, how? Because I feel like this is crazy. Like, I'm literally, I've got two kids, and they want me like. How are you supposed to advocate and do all that and the research and not be burned? And then my child doesn't sleep, and I know on the spectrum that's a big thing. It's like
Hmm.
he partying in the middle of the
Yep.
night, and I'm exhausted, and then you're expected to go to work. What about the people that have to take a break, can't work? Like, I haven't even looked it up, but I'm sure if they can look it up, there's probably some government funding for that
Yes.
as well. And I hate to interrupt you, but I was working with this person at that would come to the house. It wasn't ABA, but when the kids were young, and she would come and
It was
we'd
like
go
early start, right?
like an early
Yeah.
start. And
Yep.
she never was honest with me, and she was a young kid, but I was like, "Is he on the spectrum? What's happening?" Because we had Arlo too, my daughter, and we went to a park, and these 2 women came out of nowhere and were like, "Oh, your son's on the spectrum. There's grants for this and we can help you. And there's a Facebook."
Yes.
And I was like, okay, but, like, I didn't even know he was yet
Yep.
on the spectrum, and they're coming
Yeah.
at knowing because we're having a conversation, moms that you and I and moms that have kids on they know because they can see the signs, but it
Mhm.
was so harsh, and I got so angry, Amelia, where I was like, "Just
Mhm.
know me, get away,"
Yeah.
when that professional should have said, "Maybe we should talk to them at the park for a few minutes."
Yeah.
So, anyway, going back to that, I'm sure that there is for people that can't work. It's hard for
Yeah.
me. I give up clients every day because I have to advocate for my kid. Like there's for people out there, I'm sure there's funding for or help for people. Okay, good. Grants and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm fortunate enough where we made it work where I don't have to work, and I honestly couldn't. I mean, I went from, working full time. I was an X-ray tech in a hospital during COVID and even before that. And I mean, I don't know how people who don't have that ability to be able to stay home. I mean, I give them so much credit because regardless, it's still expensive. Even with insurance, we're still paying. I mean, we're paying over $1,000 a month for copays. There's that scholarship we have where once a child turns 3, you get this money and then you can use it towards therapies. So when Turner, my youngest, turns 3 in January, we'll be able to get that. And then there's also programs through the state. So you have Medicaid, you have Social Security. I mean, when you think of those things, you don't think of your child. But a lot of it is if your child has that diagnosis, you're eligible for these programs, and then you can get insurance through the state, even if you don't get those income requirements. So it is available, but again, it's another thing you have to reach out to. But a lot of it is going on your state website and looking to see what benefits and what grants because a lot of times no one's gonna say, oh, this is what you can use. Like no one's gonna lead you to those things. So I did some research beforehand to see what other states have, but there are vouchers. There's the early start program. You may not have as many options in terms of variety of therapists you can use, but it is there. You just have to go looking for it. And you're surprised to see all that there is, that there are these programs where people are just like, I had no idea. Nobody told me. Why aren't they telling me? And that's a total injustice that, they don't tell you about it. But there are programs out there. And again, if you're a single parent and you have to work, you typically then, there is stuff that the state can give you. And then there are other certain therapists that can work with you. But I mean, I give so much credit to people who aren't in our place where you don't have a parent that can do all this because
Oh, so
it
hard.
would be it would be impossible. I mean,
Yeah.
every day this isn't complaining. I still know
Oh,
how
no, no.
fortunate I am to be able to do this, but I am in the car driving at least if we're talking like back and forth, probably like 4 hours. If I total it all up, I have to drive them everywhere. I have to be available for this. And there's no way, unfortunately, there's no way that I would be able. And you feel guilty because you do have these copays and this money and you feel like you're not contributing to the household. But in a way, you're contributing, it's you're giving this to your child. You're doing this for them. But yeah, there'd be no way. I mean, I'm basically a glorified Uber.
Yeah. Bless it.
That's my job.
And then how are your sons they're both on the spectrum, but how are they different? Because it's interesting because there's the lonely journey, they say, of like having
Yes.
children on the spectrum where without my daughter, I think I would be heartbroken and lonely a lot because, or even when I take him to a party, he does his own thing, which I really admire. I
Mhm.
love that about him as
Oh,
well. But it
yeah.
is hard in social situations where my daughter's just like, oh, she's doing her thing, and Cash
Yeah.
is going to run after, go get.
Yep.
He's done.
Yeah.
And so to have 2, how are they alike? How are they different? And then how is their like, they go out? Do they have friends or birthday parties? How does that work?
So I think my 2 boys are a perfect representation of how broad the autism spectrum is because it's not linear. Over time, we used to have the terms of like Asperger's and severe, and they've taken those terms away. And I've seen a great graph where it's kind of like a big circle and there's certain categories and your child can be really high in one category and really low in another category. Every child is different. So Maddox, he had those words, but as I've said before, his hallmark was opposition. His comes across as he's in his own world, like he's set on these certain things. And if someone comes in and tells him, you have to go do this, he's like, why? Why do I have to go do that? Like I'm enjoying myself here. So he has, we call it, it's a newer term, but it's like PDA profile. It's pathological demand avoidance, which is what oppositional defiant disorder used to be. And he just refuses, and he'll get upset because he's being pulled away from kind of his main focus. And he's a sensory avoider. He doesn't like louder noises. He likes to be kind of in his own like zone, in his own quiet area. So that's where his is oppositional behavior and social. He's so locked into what he's doing that that's what he focuses on versus reaching out to other kids and making those connections, which is something we're working on really hard actually right now. And then Turner, he got diagnosed at 2, and his is he doesn't really have that opposition, he doesn't have that stubbornness. He is a high sensory seeker.
Mm.
So he's kind of in his own world, but he's just all over the place. So he's just, he's our eloper. He's the one where, you know, you get into an open space and he's gone because he wants to go seek out those sensory experiences. He sees something and he wants to go be a part of it. And and he's technically not nonverbal. He's getting more words at this point. But, Maddox is that stubborn sensory avoider, and Turner is that Tasmanian devil sensory seeker, but they're both on the autism spectrum. It's almost like I equate it to like they're different brands of autism. So you've got peanut butter and then you've got Jif and you've got Skippy. I mean,
Yeah.
they're kind of the same thing, but they are different.
Yeah.
So if you met the 2 of them, neither one of them is really what people used to think of as like typical autism, but they're completely different. Completely different. It's crazy to see how different they truly can be, which represents how the spectrum is as a whole. One kid can be here, one kid can be here, but yeah, they're so different and it just blows my mind.
Isn't it
Um
crazy how parks do not have gates around them? Maybe it's just an autism mom thing, but like, why can't there be gates in a park? Like with kids,
yes.
right? I don't understand it. First of all, for creepers to not come in so you can know
Yeah.
who's in there, but for kids that, yeah, Cassius he'll go off and I'm like, come back. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
wild, scary.
I
So that's,
think when I find like a playground or I find somewhere that looks like it'd be interesting, first thing I do is I go on Google Earth and I see if there is a fence around that park or that place. First thing I do, I'm like, can we keep like we just got a new splash pad in our town and it doesn't have a fence. And I'm like, I can't bring him there.
yeah.
So we have to look for ones that do have fences. So yeah, that's one of those things where it's so frustrating because it's accessibility. And you're like, why wouldn't you do that? Because yeah, I mean, that's that is incredibly dangerous for anyone. So yeah, that's something we've definitely encountered that we don't have full accessibility to what other kids and families do.
Isn't it wild how, like, if you don't have a child that you have to think about just anything like wheelchairs or
Yeah.
like anything, it's like people just don't. I just look at people, I'm like, wow, okay, your child just sits and does that. Okay. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you ever
Mhm.
have that feeling of like, Oh, they'll get better. They'll grow out of it. Or do you have the feeling or do you have all the feelings of like moments of like, this is the way it's always going to be? Because what do you say to parents out there that are not feeling hopeful, where they're like, my child's always going to just go run in the street?
Mm.
How do you process all that?
So that's kind of, I always equate it, which we've discussed, like there's the 5 stages of grief. Sounds, it sounds, very blunt, but one of them is bargaining.
Mm,
So you're thinking, okay, or well, denial and then bargaining. So you're like, what can I do to make this go away? When you first get the diagnosis, one of the first things you do is you look for things where it's solutions. How can I cure this per se? And you see all these different options, and it takes a long time to accept. I mean, I still haven't. It's not linear to accept that this is how things are going to be, because some children, I don't like, it's not that it's going to improve, but unfortunately, society isn't going to change for our children. We have to change our children for society, and you don't want to change who they are, but it's still a constant, is it gonna get better? And I think accepting it, I still can't. Every day I'm just thinking, is it gonna get any better? And that's where it comes in, of just getting as many resources and as many therapies and finding those people, those schools. I mean, they're hard to find, but finding people who will support you, because if you feel like you're not alone in it, if you're being supported and advocated for, it feels a lot less lonely. But yes, it's a constant thing where I'm always saying, why is this so hard? The guilt of, why is this so hard for him? Is this going to get better? Is he going to be able to go to this school? It's very lonely, and it's really hard. But again, you just if you just have to try and do the best you can. You have to try and do the best for them, and it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to think, is this going to get better? And then accepting that it may not. Maddox, we were still kind of on the fence about it if he was truly on the spectrum. I had this picture in my head of how things were going to be. We're going to go down here. We're going to go to the beach every weekend. We're going to, I'm going to bring him all these fun places, do all these fun activities. We're going to get him into sports. He's gonna have these birthday parties and all, and when we moved here and got the diagnosis, it was suddenly everything changes. That life that you kind of thought that you were gonna have, you end up kind of grieving that,
sure.
because you realize that it's not going to be like that. And eventually you just realize that it may have been what you thought you wanted, but you can still have that.
Right.
You just have to adapt things. You have to get to know your kid all over again. You have to figure out what works for them. So we've slowly built up to, like with Maddox, we went to the beach, a month ago or so. And he loves the beach now. He does great. But it took 5 years to get there. So you can still have those things. It's just it takes time, and it takes, like, ABA was a big thing for us. You may not have the life that you thought you wanted or needed, but you can still have that. It just has to be a little different. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was really hard coming down here and not having that. But in the end, you see that they can experience that. They can do those things and enjoy themselves. It's just gonna be a little different.
Yeah, and I think the best people are, and it's one thing about Cash that I just love, where Arlo gets upset. She's also a girl, but like she gets so upset when someone's mean to her or not likes her. Cash just could give a shit about anybody,
Yes.
anything that he's not into at the moment,
Yeah.
and so, and then we have our connections, and I like that he's not going up and telling people what his name is, and like he's just
Yes.
in the bubble, and it is an adaptation. But if he's gonna be with me and we're gonna travel and he's 25 and he stays with me, cool. I don't think, hopefully he's not in the drug scene. There's so many
Yeah.
things you kind of have to give up, but then it's not like the peer pressure at school and all that. So yeah, it's a balance. Now, is there anything else for moms out there that are just feeling because I just learned so much from you. But is there any words, the last words of advice that you could just someone's helpless or they're just feeling really down. Is there anything that you would say to them right now to get them on their feet?
I think I always talk about there are the first steps, the practical steps that we were talking about, getting the diagnosis, researching, finding the therapies, finding people who support you. But I think what I call my survival steps, it takes some time. Again, it's not linear as the entire experience isn't, but it's okay to do certain things. It's okay to say no. So say somebody invites you to a party, you know it's not going to work out for your kid. They have a pool. You don't think that's safe for your child in particular, or they want to invite you to some big family event. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. This doesn't work for us and our family. So you can say, "All right, we can't do that, but maybe next weekend we can get a smaller group of people together." So it's okay to say no. You don't apologize. I mean, you don't have to constantly apologize for, your child, the way they act. That took me a long time because in the beginning you're like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry he's doing that. And now it's like, that's who he is. So
Yeah.
it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to give your child a tablet. It's okay, Maddox has a very strict diet. I was the perfect parent before I became a parent. So I was always like, my child will not eat, Uncrustables or whatever. That's one of the foods he eats.
Yeah.
So that guilt that's there, don't feel guilty. You're doing what's best for you, or you're doing what's best for your family. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to want to scream and cry. It's okay. And then, as I said, it's okay to mourn. It's okay to grieve what life you thought your child would have.
Mm,
I mean, you can find what works for them. They're not going to be deprived because you figure out, what they like. It may be a little different. It's okay to ask for help.
mm,
It's one of the most difficult things. I'm just one of those people where you can ask my best friend who I met through an autism Facebook group. I don't ask for help. It's really difficult. You feel shame for that. It's okay. It's okay to say, like, to my husband if I'm having a really hard time. It's like, I need a break. Don't apologize. Say no. Give your child what makes them happy. People are going to judge you, but it's you. You're doing what's best for your child and your family. You're advocating at the end of the day, and these are really hard things to do, but just do it. Do what works for you. And that's taken me a long time. I think only recently I've started to do that, where I'm not constantly apologizing because I'm like, This is my kid. This is how it is." So, yeah, do what you have to do to survive. That's the most blunt way of saying it, is do what works for you. Don't apologize. Get angry, cry. It's okay. I mean, it's okay. You can't bottle that up. Just do what works for you, because it's a hard journey, and you're allowed to do that. So that's probably my biggest advice, is just
love that.
do what works for you.
I love that. That's so good. Yeah, and, like, at first my husband, because Cassius will just have a meltdown or scream, and people
Mhm.
will look, and I'm like, "I don't give a fuck who's looking at what." Like,
Yes.
I'm sure they're looking at first to just make sure Cash is okay, we're not beating him, right? But then
Yeah.
anyone that wants to judge on top of that,
Yeah.
spend a day in my shoes and pie off. Bye-bye.
Exactly.
Bye.
Exactly. And,
Yeah, so
those are the kind of people. I always said it's almost like having a child on the spectrum is a really good way of filtering people out.
yeah.
So, immediately who is going to support you. And then it's like, even though they're judging you, that just tells you that that's not somebody that you would want to be friends with. It's an easy way to figure out who's going to be there and who's not. So, yeah, I mean, it took me a long time, but yeah, if you're going to judge my kid, I don't want to be around you anyways. Yes, please.
And that's how you and I got to meet, so I'm grateful for
Yes.
that, and that advice is just beyond because I wish I had this to listen to and talk to you because I didn't know who to go to, didn't know who to trust. These professionals are not telling me to this day,
Yeah.
I don't know what level he's at, and I don't really give a shit, to be honest. I'm just going day to day, like you said, survival mode, try to do things for you,
Yep.
hydrate like you've been
Yep.
doing, so proud of you. But yeah, and then for all the single parents out there that are doing this, yeah, look up all the information like you said. Google will be your best friend and just ask the questions, right? Forget
Yep.
anybody who's gonna judge you for anything. If like you need any support, like there's tons of resources for
Mhm.
that. You have to seek that out. So, yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Amelia, you are awesome. Thank you so much for this
Thank you.
conversation. Oh, it's
Thank
amazing the work
you.
you're good. And then, yeah, I will look into ABA for later on. And again, with the ABA, I don't think there needs to be a certain time that they need to do it. It could always be part of their lives, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a continuing thing, but if you can do it early, you can, but I think, I've seen it, we've seen the most change when you get to school.
Yeah.
I think that's when it's most important to have that support in school. Cause like I said, the school's not going to change for your kid and you don't want to change them, but having that support has them branching out, meeting those friends, doing those difficult tasks. So that's when I see it as the most important is when they start school and they start to be in that more neurotypical environment.
Yeah, I love that. If you wanna send me any, like, Facebooks you like or anything that you think I could put for people that wanna
But yeah,
learn,
I have plenty.
that would be awesome. So, yeah,
Yeah.
everybody look out for that. So, Amelia, thank you so much, and you are doing phenomenal, woman. You are doing so great, and
Thank you.
I don't have to remind you of that, but we all need to be reminded of that. So,
And I mean, you are too. You.
yeah, we're standing. We're standing, and we're doing.
Exactly, exactly. You made it through another day, and that's awesome. So,
You're the best, girl. Okay, well, we'll talk soon. Thank you for being
okay.
me. All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye, honey.